Welcome to Home Flavory Eats. Today I am going to show you how to make a Mont Blanc Swiss roll. A Mont Blanc is a dessert made of chestnut paste in the form of vermicelli topped with whipped cream. Our first step is to prepare the baking pan and all the ingredients. This recipe requires a 28 by 28 cm baking pan. I have pre-cut the parchment paper for this size and put it in my existing baking pan. Next, I use a piece of foil, put it over the empty space, and create a wall to support the parchment paper. You can use this method to create any size of baking pan you need at home. And no need to buy a new baking pan each time. Here is the list of ingredients you need for this cake. Let's start preparing the ingredients by separating the egg yolk from the egg white. You can separate them by using the eggshell or use a spoon to help you. Store the egg whites in the refrigerator in the meantime. I highly recommend using a scale for accurate measurement. Step 2. Combine the egg yolk batter and the meringue. Sift the cake flour into a mixing bowl. Heat up the oil in the microwave for 15 seconds. The oil should be warm to touch but not burning hot. Immediately pour the warm oil to the flour and whisk them together. Continue stirring it until it becomes a smooth batter. Next, add the milk to the batter. Continue stirring to combine. Add one egg yolk at a time. Continue stirring until they are well mixed. Once all the ingredients are mixed well together, set it aside. We will work on the meringue next. Remove the egg white from the refrigerator and pour it into a clean mixing bowl. Add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Use an electric mixer. Start mixing it at medium-high speed. Mix until it becomes frothy. Then add 1/3 of the sugar into the mixture. Continue mixing until it becomes more smooth with smaller bubbles. Add half of the remaining sugar into the meringue. Continue mixing until it becomes more smooth, then add the last part of the sugar. Continue mixing until it becomes creamy, then turn to low speed and mix until it becomes soft perk. When you see the meringue start to form shape, stop mixing and check for consistency. Use the mixing tip to pull the meringue up to form a little perk. When the perk curls, that means it has rich, soft perk consistency. For this recipe, you want the meringue to be a soft perk, otherwise it may crack during baking. Next, mix a small amount of the meringue with the egg yolk batter. The pre-mixing of the meringue and egg yolk batter will help it fold together evenly later. Pour the egg yolk batter into the meringue. Use the folding method to gently combine them. Use a spatula to go from the bottom over the top in a U shape. Fold until the batter is combined and becomes creamy color, but you can still see bubbles on the surface. Now you can pour the batter into the prepared baking pan. Gently slap the pan onto the countertop 2 to 3 times to remove large bubbles. Step 3 is baking. Preheat the oven to 340 degrees Fahrenheit and bake for 20 minutes. In the meantime, let's go to step 4 to prepare the chestnut paste. I like to use ready-to-eat roasted chestnuts to make the paste. Begin with chopping them into smaller pieces. I use about 10 ounces of chestnuts for this recipe. Set aside 5 pieces for decorating the cake later. Put the chestnut into the blender. I just use my smoothie blender for this. I like to set aside 1/3 cup of the chestnuts for the filling later, although this is completely optional. Add 3/4 cup of milk and 1 tablespoon of honey. You should add the melted butter in this step. I just forgot about it in the making of this video. Blend until it is smooth. If the paste becomes too dry and unable to blend, you can add more milk to it. I forgot to add the melted butter earlier, but it's not too late to add it now. The chestnuts become smooth after blending and should not have any pieces left. Save a small amount of the paste to mix with the cream later. Prepare a piping bag with a small round piping tip. Put the chestnut paste inside the piping bag. Use the back of the cutting knife to push the paste to the front of the tip and store it in the refrigerator for later. "20 minutes has passed, and we are going to change the baking to convex mode for 5 more minutes. Once the baking time is up, remove the cake from the oven and transfer it to a cooling rack immediately. Cover it with a wax paper to prevent it from drying. In the meantime, we can move on to step 5 to prepare the fresh cream. For best result, store the mixing bowl and beater in the refrigerator for 15 minutes. Pour the heavy cream into the mixing bowl, then add the sugar and a pinch of cream of tartar. The cream of tartar helps stabilize the cream so that it doesn't melt easily and can last in the refrigerator a little bit longer. Mix at high speed for about 2 minutes until the cream is formed. Use a spatula to scrape down the side. When you see that the cream is starting to form shape, that's when it is ready. Add the chestnut paste that we set aside earlier and mix it with the cream. The cake should be completely cool off by now, and we can move on to step 6. Flip the cake over and remove the parchment paper. The bottom side should now be facing up. Use a sharp knife to remove each side of the cake This will help the cake to roll up later. Cut one end of the cake at a 45 degrees angle to create a slanted edge. On the opposite side of the cake, slit it 6 to 7 times. You only need to cut it halfway through. Do not cut it all the way to the bottom. This will help you roll up the cake later. You can see how easily it bends with these cuts. You may now apply the cream evenly over the top. Save a small amount of the cream to use for decorating the cake later. This step is completely optional, but I like to have some chopped chestnuts in my cake. Apply another layer of cream on this side of the cake where you will begin rolling. Place a rolling pin underneath the parchment paper and lift it up to start rolling the cake. This step requires some practice. If you didn't roll it correctly the first time, just redo it again. Turn the cake over with the parchment paper on the bottom. Use a rolling pin to hold back the cake while you pull the parchment paper away from it to tighten it. Refrigerate for at least 1 hour to let it set. Our final step is to decorate the cake before serving. Remove the parchment paper from the cake. It is okay if the skin comes off because the cake will be covered by chestnut paste. Cut both ends off because I want my cake to look clean and pretty. You can now start piping the chestnut paste over the cake. It may take some practice in the beginning, but it is not hard at all. You can also buy the piping tip that can pipe out multiple strands at the same time. If you don't have any piping bag or tip at home, you can use a Ziploc bag, cut a small hole in one of the corners. It will get the job done. Piping is like a therapy session to me because I can only focus on doing one thing and not think about anything else. Here you go, the first layer is done, but we need to add another layer on top of it. The amount of chestnuts that I'm using on this recipe allows me to pipe at least 2 layers over the cake. The piping is completed now. It really looks like vermicelli on top of the cake, but in the form of chestnut paste. I save a little bit of the cream from the filling that we used earlier and use it to decorate the top of the cake. As you can see, I did not use a piping tip here. Instead, I cut a corner of a Ziploc bag and use it to pipe out the cream. Remember the 5 pieces of chestnuts that we have set aside in the beginning of this video? Now you can use it to decorate the cake. The very final step we're gonna do is to sieve over some cocoa powder to enhance the appearance of the cake. And it actually tastes better with the cocoa powder. This beautiful Mont Blanc Swiss roll is now ready to serve. The chestnut flavor is so rich in every bite of this cake. If you are a chestnut lover, you don't want to miss out on this recipe. You will love it. This is a perfect cake that you can make for any gathering or for afternoon tea. Just pour yourself a cup of tea or coffee and you're ready to go. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more recipes.